Hey, hi everybody. Career the unemployable counselor here. I want to touch base with you a little bit today about codependency. I mentioned it in another video that I'd be looking into doing something on codependency, and I'm just going to do a short thing about that today, just to kind of get our feet wet with all that stuff. So, what is codependency, right? Everyone has it to some degree. No one is not no one There isn't anyone out there that doesn't have codependency. A lot of times it's involves relationships, and it can prevent you from having healthy relationships, and I'm going to explain why that is. I wrote down a couple of things, so you might see me look down just because there's a bit to the cover there, and I wanted to make sure that I got it right and I wasn't just pulling stuff out of my hat. If you work in a helping profession, codependency is an issue. With me as a counselor, I remember 20 years ago when I was going to go into this line of work, I had to take a bunch of assessments. One of them was called the FREEL, which is a codependency assessment. I don't know if they still do it anymore, but it was just to kind of see where you were on that scale of codependency and what your view is on those different things. And that's done because the more knowledge you have, I think it's powerful. So if you know where the cracks in the armor are, they're easier to fix. So when you go in the battle, you don't get stabbed through it. That's the way I kind of look at it. But codependency, it's when we will put. I look at it this way. Codependency is where, if we're in a relationship, we'll put all their needs above everything else because we're gonna make that work. Look at all the hard work I'm doing to make this relationship work. Right? It fills our own ego. It might have to do with the fact that we got low self-esteem, or maybe we can't identify our own emotions. Maybe we don't like to make decisions, so it's easier to be with someone who can make the decisions, and we'll just kind of surround them and make sure that's protected. You want to care for people, but more importantly, you want to feel important to someone. You see what I mean? It's filling the need inside of us. You might feel an excessive sense of responsibility for the way others act and conduct their business, right? Meaning that I'm going to transition this into the work environment. I just kind of want to lay out some stuff here. You can't deal with change, or if you do, you have a very, very hard time. You heard Mando bark; he doesn't like change either. And in the professions I'm going to talk about, you have a tendency to form a bond with the people you're caring for, but it's not because of you're helping them, it's because you're rescue them. You know what I mean? They're beholden to you for their path that they're on. If that makes sense. Okay? So a codependent person is basically someone that might have their own issues, but they can deal with it because they project it onto others, and they can work and be like, look what I'm doing, everybody, for this. Okay, doesn't mean they're bad people, right? No one's bad. Like I said, everybody has codependency. Everybody wants to be liked to a certain degree, I'm sure, right? All that sort of stuff. But what I find is that as we start going, it becomes more about ourselves, despite the fact that we're saying it's about other people. Okay, so it's been called a relationship addiction, right? I don't really necessarily refer to it as that, but it's an all-consuming vibe that we have for a specific relationship in our life. Okay, could be a loved one in the work environment. It could be someone you work for, or it could be someone who's coming to you for assistance, right? The Florence Nightingale effect, right? All that kind of stuff. But think of it this way: when you're in a healthy relationship, it doesn't matter. You can rely on each other because that's what you do in a healthy relationship. But you're still two individuals. You're still on two different paths, but you respect each other and you work with it based off that. Codependency is when there is no independence. Everything is so intertwined, right? And if you've been married, you probably might have experienced this, or if you've been in a helping profession, most definitely you probably experienced this. There's a difference between that and depending on someone for the emotional, financial, or physical support in it, meaning that you're almost a dependent, you're not a partner, okay? And that's where I think a lot of the difference leads, right? And a lot of things can happen, right? Like, if you have separate interests from your partner, that's a good thing. You don't have to do everything together all the time, right? And these are hard lessons learned, man. A lot of us have been married. A lot of us have had relationships where it's gone south. And you kind of look back, you can kind of see where maybe lines got blurred and things happened. But like I said, if you're interdependent, right? If you're an individual in a couple, that is okay, because you guys can lead your life into those things. It's when codependency comes in, and then all of a sudden it's like, I can't make a decision unless I talk to you. In the helping profession, it's like you're helping people to get better, but they're doing it through you, your way, right? It's like, oh, I advocated for this person and I got them in here, and they said if it wasn't for me, they would never have done this, and they feel good about that, thinking, oh, look, this person's going down the line, the continuum, they're being pushed through. But at the same time, in your mind, and what you're telling people is that they did it because of you. See what I mean? That's the difference there. You got to check yourself before you wreck yourself. Okay? I'll talk about some things I noticed in 20 years of working in mental health and addictions. A lot of times, once it becomes to be about you and not the person you're working with, the battle's over. It's done. They're not going to go any further because you're getting your needs met. They might not necessarily be doing what they need to do, or even if they are, they're doing it on your schedule, not theirs. See what I'm getting at? It's like if you're working with a client for 10 years, let's say, and you leave or go do something else or whatever, and they freak out and they're threatening stuff, and they're like, right, they're, oh my God, I'm gonna jump off the bridge because you're leaving, or whatever the case may be. That's codependency at its worst. Because after 10 years of working with someone, you should be able to leave or transfer or do whatever and not have people threatening to kill themselves. That's not a sign of, look what a great person I am. That's a sign of how messed up that relationship has become. And that's the difference. And that's the difference between being codependent and not codependent. Okay? Boundaries is a big one. If you're putting the other person's needs over yourself time and time again because, well, I want to make sure they're happy, or I want to make sure they like me, or if you're at work and it's like, this guy disagreed with me, how could you do that? Look at the way you're acting. I'm doing all this for everybody, and you're right. You slip into those evil eye statements, right? Only I can do this. Only I know what to do. Only I. See what I mean? Nowhere in there is about the client. Gets to be about the client is if they feel almost like they're in a corner, I find. Well, this person, and it always goes to this. Well, this person wouldn't have done this without me, or I helped this person do this. No, the person helped themselves. We just guided them to that point. That's the difference. Okay? Like most professions, like I like the lighthouse metaphor analogy. I always confuse those. But I like the lighthouse saying because, look, we're just here to shine a light where you need to go. It's up to you to get there. You do this on your schedule, right? There used to be a time when they would say, no, if you were in my line of work, after 6 sessions, they got to go. Well, there's a human element to things that don't always work like that in a cookie cutter fashion, right? It has more moving parts than that. When you're dealing with the human mind and emotions, it's not a cookie cutter type of scenario. And it goes back to another video I did where I talked about management and how as you get higher up, the priorities change. And I think that's an example of that, right? Especially when it comes to cost-cutting measures. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not besmirching anybody or anything or any agency or whatever. I'm just giving my opinion of how I think that probably goes. So you got the codependent, we'll call it the codependent person, whatever. You got a person working, let's say it's a helping profession, or you're training someone under your wing at a restaurant or whatever the case may be, and you're judging their success on you, right? Well, they're going to be good because I train them. Okay, that's okay to have an ego like that. But also if they go bad, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Oh, I trained him so good. I trained that person so good. Oh, they let me down. Well, why? Why did they let you down? If they mess up, they mess up. It's not on you. It's not a reflection on you. It has nothing to do with you. Doesn't matter if you train them or not. If they didn't retain information, that's not up to you. Or if you're calling people, giving them heck on someone's behalf, but it's ill-placed, maybe they start to skirt the line with confidentiality, right? We're starting to look at things through the lens of, no, I'll get this done for you. I'll call right now and I'll make sure this happens, right? There's a line there. And a lot of us don't see it. And when we're in that moment, we're thinking, I'm doing this for them. No, you're not doing it for them. If you're doing it for them, you wouldn't be running around telling everybody that you did it for them. See what I mean? You're getting something out of this. It's okay to be proud of what you're doing and say, you know what, I advocated for this client. I think it's going to work out okay. When it's like nothing was done, but I called and I said, you're going to do this, and how that stuff goes. Okay? It's a very, very awkward situation, especially if you're in management and you have to talk to people about, look, codependency is an issue here, and you're going to burn out if you keep doing that, because if they don't act according to the plan you want them to act with, then it's just pandemonium and chaos, and then it's like, well, why can't you do this? Like, we come up with this plan. No, we didn't come up with this plan. You and I, you out there, we could sit down and I could come up with a plan for you, but at the end of the day, that's my plan, not yours, because I made it, and I'm expecting you to follow it. Why are you going to follow it if it's not your plan? If you don't have a say in how that goes? And it's one thing to be there and be like, well, I could do that. Yeah, I'll do that. No. What do you want to do to get better? You know the steps you have to take. How do you want to get there? We can help you get there. But you got to drive the bus on that, not me. Okay? That's, in my mind, that's how those situations should work. Right? Everyone can have codependency. Everybody. Right? Like I said, going into some of the schooling I've done, that was one of them, right? Was taking the Freel, right? It's crazy. You can respect the relationship without having to control it, or without sacrificing the bond between the two. There's a lot of things go on rapport. A lot of things go on, how you get along with people, connections they make. It's not just in relationships or dating. It's everywhere, man. You go to a workplace, like I said before, you gravitate towards maybe like-minded individuals. There's always leaders, followers, there's all those types of things. But you can tell the people that need that recognition or that acclaim versus the ones that are just willing to do whatever they need because they want to fit into something else. And that's where a lot of times you'll get people in the workplace that are very, very aggressive and try to overstate their claim. I do this, I've done this, right? And the young guy or girl, whoever, down here just kind of follows suit because they're the weaker sister or brother or whatever it is, right? They're a weak link in that armor according to that hierarchy. So it's easy to pull that around, and that's how people can, a lot of times, ally build and gain things that maybe aren't necessarily good for your organization. So codependency, how do you deal with it? You got to recognize it, and you got to be open to feedback. Codependency is one of those type of things where it's like wrapping ourselves up in a blanket so nobody can see, right? We know what our motivations are. We're getting something out of this. We're getting like a good feeling, or we get the satisfaction. There's a satisfaction in doing a good job. Then it's like, this guy would be nowhere without me, right? Anyone who's been married has probably had that experience. but joking. What I'm saying is that when you're in those situations with vulnerable people, they still have a say. They might not know what to do, but it doesn't mean you have to take over for them. And a lot of times that's what happens. It becomes more of a dictation than a collaboration. And that's a mistake. That's a huge mistake. You got to roll with stuff. You got to expect them to mess up. And you have to work with them to get where they need to go. Now, I'm looking at that through, obviously, a certain lens. Being in management and being a counselor, albeit an unemployable one, it's still true. And if we all have people that we maybe feel closer to or connections with, like I said, the guy working the fries, I like him, I don't like the guy making the burgers, whatever. And then we'll do what we can to help them, and maybe not so much for the other person because we're getting something out of that. That person's successful because of me, not because of them, because of me. Okay? So again, like I said, how do you deal with that? You have to recognize it. Feedback, like I said, is the most important thing. besides being open to feedback. I've seen situations where, you give feedback or it's like, listen, I'm a little worried about this, and they get angry, they get hurt, they get upset. You don't recognize the good work I do. This is just proving the codependency is strong in this one, because everything coming back is everything about them. You're using the client or the person or whoever, you're using that entity as the justification for how great you are at your job. So if things go south with that client, then they also take the responsibility of, I don't know what they did, I laid everything out for them. Again, it's all about I'm so disappointed. You should never tell someone they're disappointed unless you're really disappointed, and not because you're upset because they didn't follow through with your plan. Does that make sense for everybody? That's the way I view it. Where codependency, it's a killer. It'll burn out people. And if you're in a health profession, it could kill the people you're trying to help. Because now, instead of them working, they might be working on some of their own issues, but if you got codependency and they're there with, if it's addictions or mental health or whatever, they're going to have something that they're looking for as well. So it creates this kind of perfect storm of circling around and, I have to help this person, right? And if you don't have a strong constitution in what you're doing, it's going to lead to things like, if you leave, I'm going to jump off a bridge, right? Or, threats, or just anger. It's okay to be upset that a relationship is ending or things move on. But if you don't address that head on, in my view, you're doing more damage. And especially if you've been seeing a client for X, or you're working with a guy for X amount of years, and then at the end, that's what it is. Then what kind of a relationship was that? Like, seriously, their dependence on you or you on them is so strong that people are threatening to do that stuff if you leave. And I always thought too, what happens if, oh my gosh, I was out in the field and I fell down a well and disappeared for a month? Or I'm sitting in a hospital bed. Are they going to bring that person up to see me so I can still do what I need to do there? Because of that dependency? No, it's ridiculous. I know, I agree, Mando. It should never happen like that. And that's why boundaries are important. Boundaries, feedback, self-awareness. These things are all key. Not everyone has them, and not some of them might, but not at the same time. Or, I've been guilty of that as well, because we're looking at something beyond ourselves. And, yeah, it's just how that goes. Yeah, it's one of those things. So you got to be careful with that. You have to look at it through a lens of, okay, here we are. This is what we're doing. And, this is how I view that world, right? Where you have boundaries. You have to have a stronger constitution to kind of realize when you're slipping down a road here. And just to know that not everything is about you. And sometimes it's hard to do that, especially when you're in situations like that. But anyways, a very, very short video, about 19 minutes, even not that short, but we'll touch more on it again when I talk with other subjects. But just want to kind of give my basic view of how I view codependency and how that is. But if you stayed till the end, thank you. I really appreciate that, and I'm hoping we'll chat more. 19 minutes. Corey, any on public counselor. Take care, and we'll talk soon.